Where do human souls come from? Some people may think that they come from heaven. Well, that's not true. But you did exist before you were born. So when God says stuff like, "Before I knit you in your mother's womb, I knew you," well, he's not just making that up. You did exist before he knit you a body in your mother's womb. Now, that's the most practical thing you ever heard. Observable a billion times over. People are still going to argue with me over, but watch. Right now you have a human body. It's pretty big. As far as size and scale goes of things creeping, crawling, walking, or flying on this earth, you're pretty big. Not as big as a whale or an elephant, but you're not as small as a little grasshopper either. Compared to a single-celled organism that only has one cell for a body, where you got billions of cells for your body. A little single-celled organism only has a little bit of mass. You have a lot of mass compared to that. I'm not trying to insult you or anything. And the reason we're talking about mass is because that really affects how you perceive the passing of time. Time is relative, and this isn't something we're guessing about. It's something we can test and repeat that test and observe the same effects over and over and over. It's consistently observable. That time is relative, and how much mass you have affects your perception of its passing. Time does not pass the same for everything all the time. As a matter of fact, time passes very differently for everything all the time. For instance, photons of light have no mass, and so they experience no time. You know, the scientists say that the light traveled billions of years across the universe to go into your eyeball so you see it in the sky. Now, while deep time is totally unnecessary in the equation, it's just not, you just don't need it, so. Other than that fact, doesn't matter how long it took the photon to get here, the photon doesn't have any mass. It experienced zero time between leaving and arriving. It's always just right now for the light. Get it? So according to the photon, it's both where it started, where it is now, where it's going, all at the same time. Just to put some things into perspective, that time is very tricky, and it's very related to how big you are. In relation to mass, not necessarily to size. But they're usually interconnected. Except it is true that sometimes some very small things are more denser than some very big things. Happens that way. Another example is the grasshopper. Dude only lives 1 year. And any way you cut the cards, it is 1 year as humans count the passing of time. Like regardless of how the time is perceived to pass, the grasshopper only gets one revolution around the sun, as the Globers say, right? So the human and the grasshopper both agree. A grasshopper's lifespan is only one revolution around the sun, okay? But because he's so small, that one revolution around the sun was a long, full, 80-year full life experience. He didn't witness it going by super fast like a human did. He witnessed it go by super slow like a grasshopper does, so that his 1 year perceptually is the same as your 80 years. His lifespan to him lasts as long in the perceiving as time as yours lasts to you. Because mass distorts the fabric of space-time, bends it, so that things have a longer path to travel to cover what would be the same distance if the fabric was just flat. Mass doesn't just bend the fabric of space-time, it stretches it out, creates more space, and therefore takes time longer to travel. This is called gravitational time dilation. I didn't make any of that up. This is called classical physics and relativity. If anybody made it up, it's Einstein. Blame that dude. So I said all that about mass and the fabric of space-time because you have not always had this much mass. Matter of fact, you lived a whole life as a single-celled organism before you ever had a human body. And by whole life as a single-celled organism, I'll say more. We are three-dimensional beings walking around in the fourth dimension of time. And I mean we walk on the third dimension of the earth through the sky, which is the fourth dimension. That breeze blowing on your face, that's the sky. That's time you are walking through, or sitting as it passes you by. Where you're sitting decides how fast or slow it passes you by. I mean, at the bottom of the building is one thing, at the top of the building is even another. And though the difference is minuscule, I mean, it's proven. The faster you're traveling, the slower time passes for you, even if according to your perception, the clock on the dash moves as slow as it always does. You're aging more slowly than everybody else that's not traveling as fast as you are. It's relativity. That's what it means. So when I say before you ever had a human body, you lived an entire, full experience of a life as a single-celled organism, even if it was very quick. From our human perception, from the single-celled organism's perception, it was slow and arduous, 80 years long. But God is far above the fourth dimension of time. Time passes far differently for stars in the fifth dimension than it does for humans walking around in the fourth dimension. Stars are immortal from our perspective. And then above that is paradise, where the throne of God is, where he sits and looks down on time. It's not as if time doesn't pass. Up there it does. But from those very large beings up there in the third heaven above it all, a human life is a wisp and a vapor. Zip! That's a whole human life. 80 years right here. From the vantage point of God's throne, and anybody around that area up in paradise, right? A human life is this right here. Zip! Did you miss it? It's this fast. Zip! Generations I just displayed of humans being born and dying on zip, zip. There's another generation. Zip, there they went. Zip, there they get. Time passes differently depending on your position in reality for certain, and also your mass for certain. Passes differently for light than it does for darkness for certain. Not only that, but how fast or slow time is moving waxes and wanes like everything else. Stretches out and contracts, right? It's time and space. Stretches out and contracts. When space stretches out, time stretches out with it. When space contracts, time contracts with it. Gravitational time dilation. Not making it up. Read that in the scientific papers that have been both peer-reviewed, published, and also on top of that is the mainstream science, right? You don't have to agree with it. You do what you want. But when I can test and measure and observe for myself, I can get on with. Before you were ever a human, had a human body at all, you had a body made out of one single cell, and you lived an entire life as such. You were first formed in your father's loins before ever your mother's womb. And you were born first from your father and had a whole life after that, didn't you? But it was so fast from our vantage point means nothing to relativity. You lived an entire experience of a life, a whole hero's journey, start to finish. You were born as a single-celled organism from your father's loins. And God did know you. As a matter of fact, he gave you instructions on what to do. And by following them, you entered the egg, and the promise was true. What promise? He said you must be born again. He said stuff like, I go and prepare a place for you. Right? God made every one of us a promise. In a previous life we all had as a single-celled organism. Let no person say they never asked to be born. Hey, guess what, y'all? You raced for your entire life and beat out millions of others to be born. Ask for it. You competed for it. You gave your whole life in search of it. A myth, a legend, a dream. Surely only fools pursue such thing as being born again, the other single-celled organisms said. Now, Jesus said to humans, except a kernel of wheat, except a seed, fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. Except a seed go into the ground and die. And right there is where it happened. That is where you as a single-celled organism died to be born again, giving your life to the instructions and the promise in hope. The zinc explosion, your body got scattered all over the inside of that egg. That egg that called to you like Holy Jerusalem calls to Christians now. That is not a sperm entering the egg. That's a coronal mass ejection. Looks to me like the egg calling. Dang, what does the earth look like? That signal from the sun keeps hitting it on its journey. Just to tell you, all things give this example right here, even grow in a garden. But there is the sun and there is the earth, and what does that look like to y'all? But every one of us on earth followed God's instruction according to his promise and hoped to be born again, and it happened. Sperm souls only get to become human souls if they follow the instructions, enter the egg, and die. And that is the moment where a sperm soul ceases to exist and a human soul begins. God knew you in your father's loins and in your race to the egg. He was cheering you on. You did it! Do it again.